Assalamu alaikum listeners, good evening and welcome. You're listening once again every Friday at 9 p.m, Friday Night Prime for you here on Salaam Radio 106.2 FM with myself Amir Suleman and my co-host brother Faisal Mahmood. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalam.
Good week?
Yeah, it's been excellent.
Quick week as always.
It flies by.
Every time we say the same thing because it's just so true. It's weird. I don't know what happens. But it's good to be busy. We always say that. As always, you're listening to Friday Night Prime, and a warm welcome to our listeners in Luton on Inspire FM as well on 105.1. We're always on Facebook Live for you, YouTube Live, online at salamradio.co.uk, and of course via our iPhone and Android apps. Always on air for you 24/7, 365, uniting all communities. Salaam Radio is all about creating unity and harmony within the Muslim and wider community, delivering the positive message of true Islam and promoting peace and harmony. Please make sure you continue to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. And as usual, with all of our shows, you can get involved with the show today via WhatsApp on 07745 278 978, or if you prefer you can give us a call, come through to the studio on 01733 602 133, or you can send us a Facebook Live message, so there's no excuse not to get involved with the show. We've got another great show lined up for you this week, and it's tying in nicely with November being Islamophobia Awareness Month. So coming up at 9:30, we're going to be chatting to Dr. Christian DeFeo, discussing his first novel, Mr. Shah, published in 2010, which is a literary attack on Islamophobia. So very relevant to this month being Islamophobia Awareness Month. It's a novel I've yet to read, but certainly will be doing so stay tuned for that at 9:30. But before that, we're going to be chatting to Reverend Adrian Holdstock, very well-known person in the community, and we'll be discussing a new initiative starting this weekend, roundtable discussions between Christians and Muslims. And this is designed to essentially foster better understanding of one another's faith in an open and honest forum. So before we chat with Adrian, let me just tell you a bit about him. I read this today and it's an interesting background. Adrian grew up in a church-going family, and his grandfather was a vicar in the East End of London, just off Brick Lane, during the Second World War. Adrian then trained as an engineer and served in the Royal Air Force for his first career, encountering a deepening of his faith during the Falklands conflict, in which he served and ended up, much to his surprise, preaching a sermon from the pulpit of Stanley Cathedral just a couple of weeks after the islands were taken back under British rule. And when he left the RAF, he settled into a career in the water industry, but God's call pulled him towards more voluntary work in his local church, and eventually he was selected and trained to be ordained as a priest in the Church of England in 2003, continuing to work in the water industry. And a few years later, he was facing redundancy. He studied for diplomas in life coaching and business coaching and established his own coaching business, which he still manages today. And meanwhile, he was a volunteer vicar in a group of churches around Market Bosworth in Leicestershire. And then 6 years ago, he felt the pull towards leading a church of his own and came to St. Mark's Church on Lincoln Road, we all know it very well, here in Peterborough, in April 2012, where he's now their vicar. And as well as running the church, he's training 2 apprentice vicars and is a governor of the Beaches School and chair of the Community First Residents Association. Busy, to say the least, I think is what I'd use there. Good evening, Adrian, and welcome to Friday Night Prime.
Good evening, Amir. It's very good to be here with you both.
Yes, great to have you here.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah. Thank you for, on your Friday night, in this cold Friday night, making your way to the studio and spending half an hour with us. It's great. So, as I was saying to the listeners, this Sunday we'll see the first of a regular gathering of Christians and Muslims to discuss what their faith means to them and to ask questions of each other's faith in a very open and honest forum. And Adrian and I will be jointly chairing these meetings. So, Adrian, can you tell me, or rather our listeners, how this idea kind of first came about?
Well, we have a saying, God moves in mysterious ways.
Indeed.
And out of the blue, I received an email from John and Wayne in St Ives,
yes,
asking if they could come and see me because they knew I had contacts with local mosques and Muslims.
Yeah.
And they came up and we came to see you and you both at your Khadija Mosque.
Yes. Yeah.
And we talked about their concept of having a roundtable discussion, an opportunity where maybe 5 or 6 Christians, 5 or 6 Muslims would sit round a table. It would be a facilitated discussion.
Right.
It wouldn't be scholars telling us what we had to believe.
No.
But it would be each of us having an opportunity to explain what's important about our faith, and to ask those genuine, puzzling questions of each other. Why do we see things differently? And actually, in my own studies of Islam and my visits to cities around the UK, I'm really attracted to the way in which we see God in slightly different ways.
Indeed.
But we have so much more in common than we might imagine.
It's so true. It really is. And we only realise how much we have in common when we have this dialogue, right?
Definitely.
We have these discussions and these open forums, open days, or, church days, whatever, like food bank, we have these all these initiatives. And when we get into a conversation, which is frankly not happening enough, as you so rightly say, Adrian, we then realise how much we have in common. It's very heartening and it's very encouraging. But why do you think we have the need for such discussions to take place like this? Why is it so important, especially today, in your opinion?
A lot of the opinions of society seem to be fed by the media. And the media is looking for sensation.
Oh, yes.
And the media is looking for conflict. And unfortunately, there'll always be those occasions when people have very heartfelt and strong opinions. But that isn't the view of most people.
No.
So if we can get together and talk and realise that we don't have barriers, that we are neighbours, we can be good neighbours to one another.
Indeed.
And again, we have a saying and a belief that we are all made in the image of God.
Yes. No, absolutely. That's so true. And, I personally am looking forward to this Sunday. As I said, Sunday is the first of what will be hopefully a very regular event. And it will alternate venues, between the mosque and the church, and maybe even St. Ives as well. We'll take a trip to see John and Wayne there as well. So, we've done similar things that we can only speak about Masjid Khadija because that's where Faisal and I volunteer. But we've done similar things, outreach programs. But this one's quite unique because we're going to be sharing our own personal experience of what faith means to us as individuals. And I think that's not something, certainly, that I've not been involved with.
No, I haven't either. And really, it's an opportunity to be quite open.
Yes.
And, from my point of view, I always feel that, we're not all the same, even me and yourself.
That's
we
true.
differ on so many things, even within the mosque, in terms of whether it's the management or the congregation, there's a lot of diversity, especially in our mosque. And I think it's about understanding and knowing that there are differences, but there's so much more in common, like Adrian just mentioned.
Absolutely.
And in terms of, for our listeners, Adrian, what do you feel is that we're going to hope to achieve from these discussions going forward? I mean, what do you think is the ultimate objective of this gathering?
I would love to see a breaking down of barriers, friendships to be forged across the communities and across the faiths, an encouragement that we should meet again, and we should feel comfortable in bringing friends and neighbours into that sort of conversation. As you said earlier, I'm chair of the Community First Residents Association.
Yes.
And on the day when there were some rather divisive marches going on in Peterborough, Community First held a unity event in the Beaches School. And it was wonderful to see something like 300 people come together and have fun and share space and enjoy each other's company.
I was there with you, and it was
I think those type of events we need to do more regularly.
Definitely.
I think we need to make opportunities rather than just some it's great, sometimes we react to things, we've got to do those, but I think if we make a regular thing where families can get together, so families from all different communities,
of course.
And sometimes, for example, we've had guests here on the radio, they might have different faiths and different ideas. But the key thing is there's other things we have in common. Sometimes we have the same interests, whether it's sports or something else, and it's just that side of things I feel is a thing that we're missing sometimes, is that friendship. And
it is that. And you reminded me, Brother Faisal, of an experience I had at one of our open days where a gentleman was walking around on his own. He seemed very apprehensive. It was clearly his first time in a mosque, and I assumed that, and it turned out that it was his first time in the mosque. But he was very apprehensive and quite anxious and didn't know whether to mingle or not. So I just approached him and had a chat, and I won't mention his name. But he admitted, he said, "Look, it's my first time in a mosque and I've been very anti-Islam." And he did say it's the media that's been feeding him, these negative portrayals. But oddly and quite surreally, we got onto the subject, I don't remember how, the subject of Britain's Got Talent. And he was a huge fan, and me and my family were massive fans of these talent shows. And we just spoke about that for 45 minutes. And after that, we've kept in touch on Facebook. And as you say, Adrian, we forged a friendship, which wouldn't have happened had we not opened our doors and said, "Look, come in and meet us. We are in quotes, normal people. And let's have a dialogue and let's talk." So, it just goes to show it works.
Yeah, it
definitely does.
Yeah. So in terms of these discussions, how do you think the format is going to be working? What sort of format would we have?
Well, we're going to gather sat round a large table. I hope that we don't all sit 6 Muslims one side and 6 Christians the other.
No.
We've agreed that men and women are going to come along together.
Yes.
And I think we don't want to put anyone on the spot and make them feel uncomfortable about sharing their faith, but we'll invite, does anyone want to say something about what their faith means to them?
Yeah.
What's important about their faith? And perhaps after we've done that, Amir and myself are going to co-chair this.
Yes.
We're then perhaps going to invite people to ask the questions that puzzle them about the other faith. But again, this isn't about scholars giving textbook answers. This is about asking one another, what is it? What does that really mean to you? Why is that important to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's how you get real genuine answers from your heart rather than, like you say, textbook. You know what the textbook answers are usually.
That's right.
I have an example to give us from the field of learning another language.
Okay.
Apparently, when you learn another language, it makes you think afresh about your own first language. So when I start to learn French and the way French is constructed and where I put the verbs and how I explain the language, then I think, isn't my English a strange language?
Right.
Now, when we start to learn about Islam, Christians will start to think afresh about their Christian faith. And I hope that when you start to hear more about Christianity, it'll make you think afresh about Islam.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, usually it does encourage you to look back into your faith, because sometimes I always find with the open days, there's always somebody who asks a question. I think, I don't really know the answer to that. And then you end up looking into it, and then obviously you come across what the Christians say about this, or Jews say about this, or other faiths, and that opens your mind in terms of what other people believe, but also solidifies whatever your faith.
I think you've summed up why I really enjoy doing those open days, because it encourages a conversation that you ordinarily wouldn't have. And that self-reflection, that self-thought, almost self-analysis, to some extent, of your own faith, you wouldn't normally do that unless you're asked a question which would then lead to that. Something which happens in the open days a lot, and you'll know this, Brother Faisal, is that people become so significantly aware of the commonality between those Abrahamic faiths, and how much we actually do have in common. I forget Jo Cox's, rest in peace, bless her, the phrase she had, I think we have more in common than that which divides us. And that's just so well said and so true. And it comes to such a forefront in my mind when we have these open days, and we interview people at the open days. Well, we film them, don't we, afterwards for feedback. They've spent the day with us, and we film them, we ask them for their opinions, and bless them, the people that attend are very open and honest and say, look, our misconceptions have been quashed, and we now understand what it is, what true Islam means. But in the same vein, while we do know about Christianity, there's so much more we can learn.
Sure.
And that's why I'm very ultra keen, as my mosque colleagues are, to attend this first event on Sunday. But as I said before, the discussions will alternate venues between the mosque and the church, which is pretty crucial for it to all work well, I think. But are there any particular types of individuals you feel, Adrian, that could benefit more from these sessions than others? Perhaps those that are apprehensive when it comes to people of other faiths than their own? Have you come across individuals like that? I certainly have, but I wonder if you had experiences like that you could share where people are quite reluctant to do these kind of things.
I think there's a range of people across the church membership, as probably you would say that there's a range of different views and levels of intensity of people across mosque membership. I think some people would be very apprehensive, and even the thought of going up to a mosque and stepping into it, how would they be received and what would it be like? And so one of our courses that we run is to do just that, to take people very gently through an idea of what is Islam, what are Muslims like, how do they think, and then an invitation for them to visit the local mosque by arrangement with the mosque.
That's wonderful.
And we've run those courses a couple of times in the last couple of years.
Oh, that's great.
I think Adrian's a step ahead of us.
He clearly is.
In terms of that.
Yeah.
I think we need to do something similar.
Yeah, we've done nothing quite to that level, to be honest. But we need to.
Be very happy to welcome visitors to St Mark's Church.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And to show you round and explain the different the stained glass windows and the arrangement of the church.
Yes.
And the history of why churches are built in that way and how we worship.
Yeah, I think that's of paramount importance for us to reciprocate, if you like, that level of learning. So these courses that you've designed yourself or devised yourself, what has been the basis of the content of that course? Is it what people have been telling you? Is that how you've kind of developed the course content?
It's a nationally published course for churches.
Okay.
And if I tell you that the course name is Friendship First, you'll see the ethos of what we're trying to achieve.
Right.
There's a very interesting element in the course where people are asked to judge what list of values do they most attune with.
Okay.
And there's a list of Western values, and then there's a list of Islamic values.
Right.
And Christians tend to tick most of the boxes on the Islamic list.
Interesting.
Because we realise that we are a post-Christian society here in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
A lot of what you see, what the media tells you, the way people behave, is no longer the Christian country based on the Christian values that it was decades and centuries ago.
That's really interesting. So what sort of items, for example, would you have on the two lists then, in terms of, because you called one a Western list and the other one a Christian list? I mean,
the Western one is much more individualistic,
okay,
capitalist-based,
okay,
whereas what we see and really admire of our Asian neighbours is the community spirit and the strength of family.
Right.
The fact that family live together, grow together, care for one another together.
That's interesting.
That is interesting, yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to take part in that course, frankly, just to get an insight into what is being said, because it's clearly having a very positive effect. But as the Reverend at St Mark's Church, Adrian, your congregation, are you faced with questions about other faiths on a regular basis, or do you find that the questions are more around Christianity? I mean, is there a split that is recognisable?
The questions tend, I think, to be suppressed.
Okay.
People have made their minds up about whether they can approach or can't speak to a Muslim.
Okay.
Whether Islam is the way it's portrayed in the media, or whether they're suspicious about that.
Right.
I want to surface the debate, the discussion, the curiosity.
Yeah. It needs to be had.
It does.
It does, rather than it bubbling under and people forming opinions of their own which are clearly misconceived. Yeah. And that can be said of Muslims
definitely,
as well, right?
Yeah,
it works both ways.
Yeah,
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
One of the things that I notice now with some of my colleagues that I pray with is they speak about the fact that they have a Muslim neighbour.
Right.
And then they talk very highly of that because the Muslim neighbour brings them some presents and food at Christmas,
right?
To celebrate Christmas.
Yes.
And when somebody was ill, the Muslim neighbour came round and was very helpful and concerned for the family. So again, they're seeing the spirit of being good neighbours.
Yes.
And in terms of what do you feel we as a community could be doing more in terms of fostering better mutual understanding of each other's faiths? I know you've mentioned a few things, but if you were to highlight 1 or 2 points, what would you say?
I think there's two elements to that. One is the more formal mosques. There are mosques, and the mosques are starting to have more open days and visits.
Yeah.
I went to an iftar meal at the Guzia Mosque this last Ramadan.
Yeah.
Faisal Medina has had a number of open days, and you have as well. Yeah. And those are always very welcome.
Faisal Medina has one coming up on 26th of November.
Yeah.
I have another one. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think you're right. I think they do a major. Although I do get frustrated with of open days in a kind of positive way, because I would love people to walk in off the street, Joe Public, as it were. Because we do invite to the usual suspects in the most respectful way possible, NHS workers, council workers, police, etc. And we'd love them to attend because, frankly, it raises the profile of the open day, and it just shows that we are one community. I love that, but I would love more and more Joe blogs to be coming in off the street, people who really don't have much of an understanding at all about Islam. But I get frustrated because I don't know how we can attract those individuals to come in, other than we do, the radio advertising and leaflet drops, etc., which have worked in the past. We've done leaflet drops in Hampton and all sorts, and we get people coming in. But is there a way you think that we could attract those types of people to come in rather than the usual attendees?
I think personal invitations go a very long way to bringing people in.
Yeah.
They take more effort, but slowly that will really make a difference, and you'll get traction with more people and say, next time, come back and bring a neighbour, bring a friend.
That makes sense. Yeah. It's laborious, but I think it's effective.
I personally feel the family fun day type things, I think they're easier, because sometimes not everybody's religious. I mean, even if you look at from the Muslim perspective, how many people out of the proportion of Muslims that are in Peterborough, how many of them attend, for example, Friday? It's a small number. Let's say, 4,000 or something.
Out of 20.
Out of 20, yeah. So not everybody's comfortable going into a mosque or that type of environment. But let's say, for example, if you had something in the park or something outdoors in the summer, or like the fun day in a school, I think that will probably.
We have something in churches we call the fringe.
Okay.
So you have the regular church membership. Okay. They're committed, or they have come along on a regular basis because they want to learn about their faith and really connect with God. And then there are people who very occasionally we see. Or maybe the husband is the committed Christian and member of the church, but his wife or his son or daughter are not.
Right.
But they're still part of the wider family, the fringe. Now, if we can offer social events, activities, or maybe like a harvest celebration worship service, but one where we're having fun and bringing more people in, and then we have a bring and share supper afterwards, that sort of thing.
I think that will certainly attract a wider subsection of the community, I think, without question. Just going back to the Unity event that Community First did at the Beaches School, I mean, it was heaving. It was overflowing with people from all walks of life and all ages, I noticed. And it was good because you catered for all different age groups. There were activities happening outside, and I just thought it was a massively well-constructed display of unity that day. And
we were so blessed with the mayor making a particular point to his chief executive. We're going to get ourselves invited to that.
Yes, he approached you effectively, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yes. Which says a lot, I think, about the event and the need for such an event.
Yes, and also about the attitude of the City Council, and that is to support communities.
Indeed.
And invest in what we can offer.
Yes. No, absolutely. Well, I hope it does become a regular event. I think it's one that will gain even more traction as it gets replicated. I think I'm certain about that. Adrian, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on Salaam Radio for the second time. I'm reliably informed. I wasn't aware of your first time. I think it was with Ansar Ali, wasn't it?
Yes.
In the early days. It must have been about a year ago now.
Yes.
But thank you so much. I look forward to Faisal, and I look forward to seeing you again on Sunday, of course, at the mosque.
Yes.
And I hope we have you back on our airwaves soon, which we need to talk about off air at some point, don't we?
And of course, next Friday you'll be reporting back to our listeners.
Oh, of course I will.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Thanks again, Adrian. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Listeners, do stay tuned. As I said, coming up in about 4 minutes, we're going to have Dr. Christian DeFeo with us, chatting about a novel that he wrote back in 2010, which is a literary attack on Islamophobia called Mr. Shah. Stay tuned for that. It should, inshallah, be a good conversation.
Stay tuned to Salaam Radio after this short ad break.
Sadly, millions of orphans living in the poorest countries lack the necessary support for a healthy childhood. These children have to endure lives of hardship without the basic necessities that would help them to grow, to learn, to live. Let's show them that we do care. Let's brighten up their future. Call 0161 225 0225 or visit humanappeal.org.uk.
Do you like the idea of being a radio presenter? Have you got a great idea for a show? Why not get in touch with us? We are always looking for enthusiastic, committed and professional individuals to join our team of volunteer presenters. Send us an email to info@salamradio.co.uk and we'll be in touch. You could be on air sooner than you think.
Third world and developing countries are home to some of the most vulnerable children on the planet. Malnutrition, severe lack of medical aid and access to clean water are just some of the horrific challenges faced by orphans across Africa and Asia. Children of Adam, a Peterborough charity, need your help to bring aid to these orphans for just £25 a month. To sponsor an orphan or assist with other projects, please call 0300 321 0032 or visit www.childrenofadam.net.
Iqra Academy is the only Muslim girls' school in Cambridgeshire where your daughter will develop her knowledge of Islam and the national curriculum in a safe environment. Ofsted has judged the teaching and learning, leadership and management, pupil behaviour and personal development as good in June 2017. Iqra Academy's qualified staff teach in small classes, and the school is producing sports teams who have a track record of succeeding at national level. With reduced fees and a good rating 3 times from Ofsted, why not consider Iqra Academy for your daughter? Enroll now to avoid disappointment. Please contact 01733 331 433 or email admin@iqraacademy.org.uk.
عن أمير المؤمنين أبي حفص عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه قال: سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول: إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى، فمن كانت هجرته إلى الله ورسوله فهجرته إلى الله ورسوله، ومن كانت هجرته لدنيا يصيبها أو امرأة ينكحها فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه. I'm gonna take my bicycle and ride out to a field and pray under the sky with the mosquitoes and the birds. We can pray together, you can come with me. Have you ever called a van while standing high up in a tree? Every single blade of grass, every day and month that pass, every colored leaf that decorates the fall.
This is Salaam Radio, Peterborough's Muslim community radio. Broadcasting on 106.2 FM and online.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Friday Night Prime here on Salaam Radio 106.2 FM, and a warm welcome back to our listeners in Luton, Inspire FM 105.1. We had a great conversation, didn't we, Brother Faisal?
Yeah,
with,
it was really good.
Reverend Adrian Holdstock. Very enlightening, very insightful, and look forward to catching up with him at Masjid Khadija this Sunday to continue the discussion and have this first session. But now we're honoured to have with us Dr. Christian DeFeo, who was kindly joining us in the studio. So Dr. Christian DeFeo was originally from New York, and he moved to Britain in 1988 after working for many years in technology. He pursued his passion for creative writing, eventually graduating from the University of Southampton's PhD in Creative Writing programme back in 2010. Now, his mentor was the noted Pakistani author Amir Hussain, and his first novel, which was a literary attack on Islamophobia entitled Mr. Shah, was published in 2010. Good evening, Christian, and welcome to Friday Night Prime.
Good evening, and thank you for having me on.
Oh, well, thanks for coming in on this cold Friday night, but suitably warm in here, I hope you'll find.
It is indeed, thank
you. Good. Not too warm. But listen, I'm fascinated by this novel. I mean, our very own Dr. Shabina brought you to my attention, actually, because you and her, I know, have met on several occasions. So a shout out to Dr. Shabina. Thank you, sister, for bringing Christian to our attention for what will be, I hope, and I'm sure, inshallah, a great conversation. So, can you describe this novel to us? What's it all about, essentially?
Well, when I first started thinking about the book, it's sort of, inspiration is a very funny thing. It can hit you all of a sudden, and then it can sort of gestate inside you and possess you almost.
Right.
And so I began this when I was doing my master's degree.
Okay.
And one of the exercises that they have you do is that the lecturer would stand at the front of the classroom.
Yeah.
And he would say, "Please give us random words." And so the people were throwing out words like hypochondriac and kaftan, and then all of a sudden, I had this vision of this particular character.
Okay.
And I named him Wahid.
Yeah.
And I had this vision of this person who was a hypochondriac, very sensitive to the environment around him. And then as the idea developed, and I thought about it, and then I realized that this person is particularly harmless. Yet we're living in such a world that a person who is that harmless could still be perceived as threatening.
Right.
And that was how I began exploring the themes in the novel. Now, because of his condition, his hypochondria, his obsessive-compulsive disorder, he behaves in a way which is perceived as threatening on the London Underground.
Okay.
And then what proceeds could be called I wouldn't call it a black comedy, but almost a Kafkaesque exploration of how debauched our system has become. So the police pile in and they want to make an example of him. And the media piles in and they want to make an example of him, and so on. And in the end, it finally takes somebody who is clear-headed enough, namely a judge, to basically say, "You got to be kidding.
Right.
This is ridiculous. Yeah. This guy's obviously a hypochondriac. He's just behaving a bit strangely. He's not malevolent in any way whatsoever. Sure. But there's a long journey from there to the end. And the other thing is that he also goes on a journey of personal growth, whereby he understands why it is the way that he is.
Right.
So what is the origins of his hypochondria, his obsessive compulsive disorder?
Yes.
And so it was quite, believe it or not, we're coming up to the 10th anniversary of when I began to write this novel.
Wow.
So it started out as something relatively simple, almost a character sketch.
Yeah.
And then it became this much deeper exploration. And I don't want to put too many labels on this, but it seems it's almost divine providence, I dare say.
Okay.
That I came up with the idea before I met Amir.
Right.
And then when I was searching around for my PhD, I put in for a number of different universities, and then I go to the University of Southampton and said, "Hello, this is Amir Hussain. He's a noted author in Pakistan." And I thought, wow, all right. Okay. It was thanks to his tutelage that it became what it was.
So Amir Hussain was lecturing at the University of Southampton?
That's right. He was the professor of creative writing.
Oh, I see.
And so I still consider him my mentor in writing.
Yes.
And he's still, so far as I know, still publishing quite actively and still quite active.
Okay.
And he's one of those people who he's well known himself, but some of the people that he's also been an inspiration to is also quite well known.
You explained how the idea originated, but then how did it develop? I'm no creative writer, but my daughter is a kind of aspiring one. Yeah. But how did you then develop the idea? I mean, to go into hypochondria and OCD, and I mean, did it come from any real world experiences?
I almost had to give myself OCD in order to do it.
Wow.
So
method writing.
Yes, in a way, yes, because so I sat down with another advisor, because you get a couple of advisors when you're doing a PhD. Yeah. And I had a bottle of cranberry juice with me, and so she said, explain to me how Wahid sees the world. And so I picked up the cranberry juice and I said, imagine you went through and you thought through every bit of how this bottle of juice was manufactured. You thought about where the water came from, what pesticides were used, who was handling it, did they have clean hands, and so on and so on and so forth. And by the time I went through this entire thought process, my advisor said, "Why on earth are you drinking that?" And so I think that there is a certain amount of there are real dangers in this world, and there are real things that should bother you. Yeah. However, what made it particularly difficult was you had to heighten your sensitivity to it all. Right. And so the second element was, of course, was following the news and really getting into the spirit of the times and trying to look at things with different eyes. Now, I come from New York. Yeah. And one of the things that I would go back to New York and I'd switch on the television news. Yeah. And it would be, I'll be blunt, the image that Muslims are portrayed in most American news is not a positive one. No. But this doesn't jibe with my experiences living in London. This doesn't jibe with my experience of having, Amir as my mentor, and so on and so on.
Because I think in the notes you lived very close to the Finsbury Park Mosque.
I did. I had an N7 postcode.
Oh wow!
And so basically, and so basically, the people who lived around there, they were my neighbors. Yeah. And so, and the other thing is that beyond after reading the novel creating the novel, pardon me, is that I lived in Bradford for a while. Okay. And so basically, if you were to tell me if you were to ask me right off the bat, okay, Christian, you can have two neighbors. You can have the young men who drink cheap lager and hang their sweatpants off of the gate of Bradford Industrial Museum on Friday night, or you can have the nice folks who live around the corner who keep themselves to themselves and go to the mosque on Friday. Right. I vote for door B. Thank you very much. Because I've seen enough sweatpants hanging off of the gate of the Bradford Industrial Museum in my time. Thank you very much.
That's interesting. That's great.
So, Mr. Shah was your first novel. Have you written any others?
It's my first completed novel. I have not. I've been. I would love to write another novel, and believe it or not, and I'm sorry, Dr. Shabina, I know that you're listening. Believe it or not, she gave me an idea for one.
Okay.
Great. Because I had to outside of what I do is that I also write pieces for my work, and I interviewed her for one of those pieces, and she told me a story about how she worked in a hospice during a Christmas period. What a lovely story that would be about a doctor who works at a hospice over Christmas, an affirmation of life, also cross-cultural communication. What a wonderful story that would be. Now, I'm busy doing a lot of things, and so I haven't as much time to write as much as I would like. I mean, I have political career. I'm working on a second PhD at the moment and other things. But so it's a little difficult, but
it's still clearly a passion of yours.
It is still a passion of mine. I still write quite a lot. It just expresses itself in different ways. So for example, I was head of communications for Fiona Onasanya during the election campaign.
Yes.
So, but the writing doesn't leave you. When Mohsin said that it takes him, it was waiting for the novel for 6 or 7 years, and I thought at the time, golly, that seems an awfully long time. No, if you have a busy life, I sort of get it. He did mention at the time that he was going to continue doing his day job. I think he was working in investment or something. Okay. But I understand where that would come from.
Interesting.
I mean, you must have to shut yourself off when you're actually going through the process of whether it's planning it or actually doing the writing. Because, I mean, I've tried to write simple things sometimes, even like writing an email or a short white paper or something.
Right. Yeah.
And there's so many distractions that I end up spending hours and hours and don't get anything done.
Yeah.
It's when you're writing creatively like this, it almost is like a fever. It's almost like being you get so trapped within your imagination. So, for example, I would be walking somewhere, and then all of a sudden the vision of the novel, some idea would come along and seize me, and I'd have to find some way of writing it down or keeping it. And it does become all-encompassing. It does require, at least that's the process I do. Other people, your mileage may vary. Everybody's process is very different.
Interesting. Dr. Shabina was messaged in, actually.
Oh, okay.
So there's evidence that she is listening.
Oh, okay.
So
sorry about it.
No, she's asked a question, which is actually a question I was going to ask you myself. So you know, she's going ahead and asking. Thank you, she said, first of all, for such a wonderful insight into your book. Do you feel that as a community there are things that the Muslim community could work on to help combat Islamophobia above all the work that is already being done? Are we missing something? Actually, this is the question that we asked Reverend Adrian earlier on.
Yeah. I'm going to bring sort of a slightly American perspective to this.
Please do.
Okay. I am the child of immigrants.
Okay.
My grandfather immigrated to New York from Norway in 1928. My grandmother came from Sweden at the same time. My other side of my family came from Italy earlier in the 20th century.
Yeah.
Their presence, even you might think, oh, Scandinavians, they must have thrown open the doors and welcomed open arms. No. They basically, if you didn't speak the language, if you weren't, Anglo-Saxon and so on, then there was a certain disdain.
Yeah.
And people and when people talk about that, there's like Muslim neighborhoods. Well, from where I'm sitting, that looks like Little Italy.
Right.
Or that looks like the Norwegian community in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Or that looks like, these things were part of the normal process of people who were coming from distant shores and settling in their homes. I think a lot of the things that have been done, I mean, for example, I remember not too long ago that there was a mosque open day.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of thing is very, very helpful in terms of bridging that gap, bridging that divide. The one handicap that the Muslim community in Britain, there's a couple of handicaps that in Britain. Number one is the class system.
Right.
Now I've felt it much less roughly than some others, but I understand. I remember when I first moved over here in 1988, and I remember some snickering behind my back about me being a dumb colonial. So I do remember that, and it's less pronounced now. But in any case, the class system still is prevalent, and there's not much you can do about that.
No.
But the thing to keep doing is to remember is that as time goes on. And generations succeed after another, is that it seems to me that the students that I've taught, the generations that follow, they seem to be more open-minded and tolerant and progressive than their forebears. And so perhaps don't continue to be continue with openness, but continue to be to not be afraid to be part of this country,
right?
Because you are, and there are some misguided people who believe that the world would be a better place if everybody who didn't have the surname of, I don't know, Smith or something left tomorrow.
Yeah.
That would include me. But, if that did happen, there would be like tumbleweeds blowing down the middle of Peterborough and nothing would happen. There wouldn't be this wonderful diversity that we have here.
Yeah.
And I think just the continuation of the openness, and perhaps just remember that there is a certain level of the future. Look to the future.
Yeah.
Look to the future.
No, wise words. Wise words indeed.
Yep.
So, So when you compare... Sorry, I lost where I was. So when you compare the events of your novel to real-life events and experiences of Muslims today, are you surprised that life is almost imitating art?
I'm disappointed.
Yeah.
I thought that... when I first wrote it, I thought that the premise was an absurdity to demonstrate the direction of travel.
Right.
And I thought and I didn't expect it to become more true as time went on. it has. I've become very disappointed that that's the case.
Yeah.
Both in Britain and the United States. And so it becomes to the point where people's motives are being questioned all the time and so on. And it's even manifested itself in things that are completely absurd. So, for example, there's a Canadian politician. His name is Jagmeet Singh.
Right.
And he just was elected to lead the left-of-center New Democratic Party in Canada. He's a Sikh. He showed up wearing a turban.
I remember this.
And then this young lady comes and harangues him about Sharia law.
Yeah.
Okay, number one, wrong religion. Number two is that you're completely off beam and you have no idea what the heck you're talking about.
Right.
But that could have been almost a comedic premise of a novel, that people are so wound up and so absurd that they do stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well,
there's so many examples of that.
Exactly. Yeah. The one I'm reminded of, just recently it was Diwali, right? The Hindu festival, and there was Britain First tweeting about these Muslims should stop this fireworks. That was it. Yeah. So I mean, it's everywhere. It's rife. Yeah. But I think the comedic premise of a novel is certainly there, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and it's a strange sort of thing. Is the paranoia? Paranoia under certain circumstances can be actually funny. For example, I think that we've all seen, or many of us have seen, that video where they interviewed that Britain First supporter who couldn't even pronounce Muslim correctly. He was going Muslimic law and so on and so forth.
Defense League.
English Defense League. Pardon me. And it was. If it was any other context, we would be rolling on the floor laughing at this guy because he was so absurd.
Absolutely.
And I think that we have to come to the conclusion that this type of behavior, if it didn't threaten violence, we would be laughing at it.
Right.
Definitely. I mean, you have a long-standing interest in religion and deep faith. What's the reason for that?
I've been very fortunate in my life, and I am not arrogant or enough to believe that it is due solely to things that I have done. I believe that, for example, the meeting with Amir.
Yeah.
No, I couldn't have planned that. I couldn't have done anything about that. But I've been, and the other thing is that I'm here.
Yeah.
It is very entirely possible that my life could have been that I stayed in New York and that I did that I got a regular job, that I was commuting into New York City and so on. But I've been very, very fortunate in my life, and I'd like to think that there is a higher power which is helping me along. Now, there's an expectation, I believe, that we are all called to service. And I believe that is, my faith also guides me in that too, is that I believe that one of the best ways that we can serve God is by serving others.
That's no different to what we say in terms of fate and destiny and those type of things. Exactly. I think we share those ideas.
Exactly. Now, I see you have your book in front of you.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to put you on the spot, so if you haven't got a piece ready, don't worry. But I'm wondering, is there an excerpt you could perhaps read on air from the novel?
I do.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
So, basically, Wahid has been in prison.
Yeah.
And he's been feeling the pressure of his condition, and he's been drinking quite a lot of water.
Okay.
Now, he's been assigned a psychiatrist who's been trying to work with him to talk him down.
Right.
And so the doctor asks him, "Have you been continuing to drink the water?" "What for?" Wahid asked. "I'm not getting closer to being clean." She surprised him. She smiled. "That is positive," she said. "What?" "Rituals are important, but true cleanliness comes from how you think, how you act, and your sincerity," she explained. Wahid paused. "Do you harm others?" she asked. No, he did not. "Do you help others?" she asked. Wahid recalled picking Basir up off the ground, a colleague of his who's also in prison, after he had been beaten. He shrugged. "Do you love your family?" "Mother, father, and Rania." Rania is the name of his wife. Dearest Rania, who was casting thoughts out to him perhaps right now. Perhaps she was looking at the moonlight above the smoke and din of Karachi and sending those thoughts on a breeze drifting westward. If only the vapor of those thoughts could take form and shape for him to clutch to his heart. He shut his eyes. "You are a good man, Wahid," Dr. Blanchard said. Wahid felt tears well up. What did she know? The evil he had refrained from in his life, and the good he had done for others. Had that been because he was genuinely good or because he had been afraid? What was genuine good then? Good acts that only came from being sincerely generous? Was generosity merely an illusion that people made for themselves to validate their existence and to hide the fact that they were afraid? I am afraid, he thought. God was out there after all, and he feared him. He feared him and nearly all that had been created of him, by him. But did he love his family? The yes in response flowed like warm honey through his veins. Quick, 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 slow. His heart beat faster and fell back. Yes, he loved his father. Yes, he loved his mother. Yes, he was still in love with Rania. Yes, he loved her to the point that he loved God for making her.
Wow.
That's deep.
Very powerful stuff.
Thank you.
Very powerful stuff. And forgive me, but you were almost getting a bit emotional, I think, as reading that, which is great.
That.
You could feel it.
Yeah. Well, it was not the easiest book to write, I must admit.
No, I'm sure.
It was not the easiest book to write. But
thank you for that, because it's such a small excerpt, but you can get a flavour from a book, from a novel, by a small excerpt. And that seems very powerful. It just makes me want to read it even more, frankly, as I'm sure it does our listeners. In terms of availability, I'm assuming Amazon and the likes, and others.
It is available on Amazon.
And many other retailers online are available. Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean it's available. It is available via Amazon mainly. You can also it's available in both ebook and print format.
Fantastic. It was one to check out for sure. But I mean, just going back to the point that Dr. Shabina raised about other initiatives, because this show, the theme this week is about Islamophobia because it's Islamophobia Awareness Month.
Yes,
as you're obviously aware. But so it tied in quite nicely that you were available this week. But we have spoken and racked our brains as a community and as a mosque about other initiatives that we could adopt. And Open Days work to an extent. What we're doing this Sunday is like a roundtable discussion with a group of Christians and a group of Muslims to share experiences about what our faith means to us.
Yes.
And then have that open forum to ask each other questions about what does it personally mean to you? So not questions about the Bible or questions about the Quran so much, but more about, what does it mean to you? What does this part of your faith mean to you as an individual? And I think that level of dialogue, and, if you disagree, please do tell me, but do you think more in-depth, heartfelt discussions like that are needed to alleviate what is rife in the community, which is or rather in the world, which is Islamophobia?
I think openness. There's an old saying: "Sunlight is the best disinfectant," and I think that's absolutely true. One thing that springs to mind, is that, like I said, I'm part Norwegian, and I remember the response after the Norwegian Prime Minister after Anders Breivik did his horrible act.
Yes.
And basically, Norwegians, and speaking for myself, we are a contrary bunch. And basically, the Prime Minister, who is a guy named Jens Stoltenberg, basically said, Breivik wanted us to shut down. We're going to respond with more openness. Breivik wanted to get rid of our democracy. We're going to respond with more democracy. And I think that's the way to do it. I mean, I remember when, if I remember correctly, is that when the EDL came here, there was tea and samosas and so on and so forth. Keep doing that, because I think when you unpick it and when you cast aside all the tabloid newspapers and you throw away all the stereotypes and you basically don't pay attention to what the television is telling you anymore.
Right.
Then and you discover that we're all regular folks. We're all trying to make a living. We're all trying to get on in life. We all love our families. We all love our children. We're all trying to and we also have most of us. I mean, some of us don't have any faith, but most of us have a faith in God and a belief and a guiding set of moral principles, which we've, through this discussion, have more or less uncovered a consistency.
Absolutely.
And the more that we articulate that, then the greater the understanding will be. The part of the problem is that we're living in an era of insanely cheap politics.
Yes.
And we're living in an era where it's very, very easy for some people to profit out of blaming others, the other. Who is the other today?
True.
Now, in the 1980s, and I remember this, is that I remember when people were blaming stuff on the Irish, and you had the Baltic Exchange bomb and so on and so forth, and people say, oh, we got to do this about the Irish and that about the Irish. I remember this. And
I'm so sorry to cut you off.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, this is for another show, I think.
Okay.
But we literally have 10 seconds left.
Okay.
So I want to use that to thank you for coming on air.
Oh, thank you.
It's been intriguing and enlightening, and the book sounds wonderful.
Okay.
Do stay tuned, listeners. listeners to Salaam Radio, as always. We'll be back with you same time, same place next week.
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Stay tuned to Salaam Radio after this short ad break.